Today we're about to discuss more object-oriented programming. Stand by. This video is about to start. What's up, folks? You already know who this is. This is the Savage Scientist Ed. And today we're going to talk about object-oriented programming. And this is our second treatment of object-oriented programming. So here go the list of topics for this video. So while you're looking at these topics, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and like and share this video. So it's time for us to get into our treatment of object-oriented programming. All right, so let's get our mouse over here to DevC++. And we're going to create a new project and call it Day 15. Now it's time for us to start writing our code. First thing we're going to do is drop our user namespace std line. Next, we're going to get rid of all this crap in our main function and just make it simplified. Eventually, we're going to talk about argc and argv, but for now, let's get rid of it. Let's bring our code down a little bit. So line 3, we're about to put some comments in here. We're about to create our class. So we're going to use our class keyword. It's standard practice to name our classes with a capital letter. So we got our box here. So now let's work on our constructor. And a constructor is a special function that's called whenever we create an instance of our class. We can look at the class as the cookie cutter and the object is the cookie. So in C++, when we create an instance of our object, it's called instantiation. So we're going to print this cout statement that's going to print the word box constructor whenever we create our box. And this is to show you that the constructor is called. A lot of times in object-oriented programming, we will not waste a lot of space by spacing out our code. We will go with more of an inline technique. So inline code just means we're going to put everything on the same line. So this is not inline, but I'm about to fix this and show you what inline code is. So this is inline. And notice everything is on the same line. That's it. Just to save space in our class. So let's create a box in our main function, box B1. That's the name of our box. Now let's go back to our box class and we're going to put our public and private labels into the code to differentiate the sections of our code. And now let's compile it. So as you can see, our box constructor is printed in the results. Now that we just tested our code, let's go back and clean it up a little bit. I'm going to indent our constructor and let's start putting our private data in our class. So we're going to call our y value y height and our x value x width. Now let's move our constructor comments down on top of our constructor here. And now we're about to start talking about the destructor. The destructor could be looked at as a garbage can. Once our object is out of scope, and scope just means it's not being used, the destructor is automatically called and box destructor will be printed on our screen. On line 25, our box is created. And when it's created, it immediately hit the constructor. So that's why we have line 12, box constructor being printed. And immediately our box went out of scope. So line 14, box destructor was called immediately after. There's nothing in between, no code to execute. So that's why it looked like it was an in and out thing. So now let's create some methods. Methods are functions. They serve the same purpose, but in object-oriented programming, it is called methods, or especially if you're doing Java programming. So let's create our getHeight method. This is going to have an integer return value, and let's work on the body of this function or method. So we are just going to return the value of our private data called y height. And that's why it's named get y height. So we're going to do the same thing for getXWidth. We're going to return XWidth, the private data. And that's how we access private data, because we cannot access private data directly. We have to use a public method. And you notice these methods are within the public section of our code. So now let's move on to our two setting functions here. We're going to create one called setYHeight. And notice the return type is void. On line 19, we are creating a method called setHeight. And this method will not have a return type like lines 17 and 18. You notice we are returning YHeight and XWidth. And we are using the return keyword. So now let's finish implementing our void method. So let's start with our input parameter. Will just be the word input, and it's going to be an integer value. And we are about to set our private data YHeight to the input value we supply. And let's do our next method, void setXWidth. Same thing here. Our input value is going to be input, and notice we could use the same value input in both of our methods, because each method, setHeight and setWidth, will have its own version of our input variable. So this is the savage scientist coming at you in post-production. Instead of using input twice on line 19 and 20 for the parameter on our setHeight and setWidth methods, I could have used input X on the setWidth method and input Y on the setHeight method. So now let's look at the body of these two methods. You notice we are using the assignment operator, the one that looks like an equal sign. So we are always going to set the left-hand side is going to get the value from the right-hand side. So we are setting YHeight to input. The ultimate goal of this method is to assign 5 to our private data YHeight. So let's continue. So we're going to create our box B1, line 32, and we're going to drop down to set its height. We're going to set our box height, or our Y value, to 87. So we're about to perform many tasks in our next step in this statement. Starting on line 34, we're about to print our box height. We're about to put the text box height on the screen. And let's get our box height using the box height function, get box height function. And we're about to print the words box width. And let's get our box width. I'm going to eventually go back and use the function b1.setXWidth, and we're going to give it some value. And we're about to print the area. To print the area, we're going to multiply using our getWidth and getHeight functions, and that's going to give us the value of those two, or give us the product of those two. And remember, in mathematics, when you multiply two numbers, it's called a product. There's a bug in this code on line 35, and the hint will be looking at lines 17 and 18. I want you to pause the video, figure it out, and then unpause, and I'm going to give you the solution. Alright, so let's solve this problem. So the getWidth function and the getHeight function doesn't exist as I wrote it. So it's missing the X and Y part. So we're about to change this to getXWidth and YHeight. So now on line 34 and 35, our getXWidth and getYHeight methods are matching just like they should when you look at lines 17 and 18. So now it's time for us to talk about setting our width. And I want to mention the dot operator. The dot operator is what we use to access methods from our functions. So notice, we're always going to start off with our object, which is B1, and we're going to put a dot here. The dot means we're about to call a function. And normally if you have a compiler, a very smart compiler, it will list all the functions or all the methods associated with that class. Our class is called box and our object is B1. So on line 34, we just got done setting the width of our box to 144 using our setWidth method in our box class. So now it's time for us to run our program. So remember in the beginning when it just printed box constructor and box destructor? Now, in the middle, we have our box height equals 87 and our box width 144. And for the area of the box, you just multiply width and height. That give us 12,528. And notice our box destructor follows because it's out of scope. So we just discussed some of the basics of object-oriented programming. And this is our class. And normally we would take our class and write it to a header file. And normally that file would then be of .h.hpp, one of those extensions. And then we go and use that later in our code. So we're going to discuss header files more in the future. So this is the Savage Scientist Ed on day 15 of this C++ journey. So till I make my next video, peace out.